Hi, welcome to Marriage Matters. I'm Dr. Mark.
And I'm Liz. We're your marriage and communication coaches, here to inspire, instill hope, and empower you to weather the challenges of married life.
Today, Liz and I are absolutely thrilled. We're bringing back an extraordinary attorney and actually a personal friend, John Benson of Penglase and Benson. You know, we've talked with John previously about several really important aspects in life, wills and estates, and making sure that when those things happen that we're not really looking forward to in our life, that we're able to protect those we love. We were talking a little bit about starting and making sure we're set for a small business or a side gig that a lot of people have taken up across the pandemic. Unfortunately, with the pandemic also comes financial hardship, and John's joining us today to really go through an area that he and his team have expertise in, which is in bankruptcy. And it's a complete morass to those who don't understand it. John, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, we're happy to have you here, but for those who have not seen one of your two fabulous episodes before this one, can you just give us a little refresher of who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Well, certainly, I'm John Benson. I'm an attorney at Penglase and Benson. We're in Doylestown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and we practice in all sorts of areas, such as what we've spoken about before, wills and estates, creating businesses, and in some cases, dealing with debt situations.
You know, debt is one of those things that we all sort of incur, and when something like the pandemic hits, you're out of work, we are in a place that we may not have that cash flow. And now that the moratorium on evictions and things like that have come up, we just learned ourselves that we had a home equity line of credit that was literally locked by Wells Fargo, and we can't access it. So we don't have some of those abilities to use our usual tools. So people are going to be moved into places that they may actually need to have some help with that overwhelming debt. So what is it that you can do as far as starting to advise people on whether or not they need to look at the possibility of bankruptcy or other tools?
Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, there really is a debt storm brewing, and it's unprecedented for our times. Because of the pandemic, a lot of people have been out of work. A lot of people have just been relying on pandemic unemployment compensation. There's been the eviction moratorium. And while the government has given out a lot of money, especially to help people pay their mortgage, pay their rent, what we've actually found in practice is people have received the money, they've used the money for other things, and they haven't paid the mortgage or the rent because there's no way that the government has to enforce that, to make sure that they do that. And because it was an eviction moratorium, everyone said, well, I don't have to pay these things right now, I can deal with them later. And later is now here. And so the eviction moratorium is over. Landlords, banks are running to court to get evictions at this point. The pandemic unemployment compensation is coming to an end, so that tap is running dry, and now people are having to deal with the harsh realities of debt that they haven't had to deal with in the last year and a half. And so a lot of people are now looking for ways that they can address debt. And there's a number of ways you can do it. One way is you can do maybe credit counseling. And credit counseling is good. They will teach you how to deal with the debt, but the next stage is usually hard for people, and that's actually doing the things that they've been taught, putting them into practice. And they fall by the wayside and they get more and more into debt. In addition, these credit counseling companies can try and negotiate with companies that you have debt with, but they don't have to negotiate. Now, another way you could do it is you'll see a lot of commercials regarding debt reduction. There's these debt reduction companies. Pay us some money and we'll make your debt go away. The problem is most of them are scams. And so they're going to take your money, now you're even further in debt. They'll try maybe and negotiate with your companies that you owe money to, but again, they don't have to negotiate with you. So now the person's left with, what do I do? And usually they're going to be sued. They're going to be sued by the credit card company. They're going to be sued by the landlord. They're going to be sued by the bank to get the house back. Whoever's lent them credit, they're going to get sued. And now they're really panicking. And they're trying to figure out, what am I going to do, because the other ways just haven't worked. They looked good, but they weren't really good. Just one way that they can deal with it is bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy has this big stigma to it that's been passed down through almost generations now. That, I'm going to file for bankruptcy and all these terrible things are going to happen. Actually, the opposite is really what is happening. Bankruptcy is a legal process through the government, through the court systems, to responsibly deal with your debt. And while you go through that, you can either, depending on which way you go with bankruptcy, and there's a number of different branches you can go, you can work out repayment plans, you can get the debt forgiven, and at the end you come on out and you have a fresh start.
I just want to say that I think this is really important what you just said, because honestly, the word bankruptcy, most people are terrified of it. You're absolutely right. And it's because we don't understand enough about it. So I love what you're doing here today for our audience, for our viewers, is you're bringing sort of a positive spin to something that people are so terrified to do, and now you're bringing hope.
I was going to say, I maybe this is just me and my sort of medical thinking, but what is the definition of bankruptcy, and what does it really mean? Because we talk about it, but
that's an excellent question. Bankruptcy is really where you've got more debt than you've got assets or money coming in to deal with that debt. And so, again, filing for bankruptcy, people used to have this terrible stigma. Oh, it's going to ruin your credit. Well, that's a myth. Let's face it. If you're in such bad shape that you're being sued, you're having to go to court, you're facing eviction, your credit probably wasn't that fantastic to begin with. But now, think about it. You go through the bankruptcy process, which in some cases can be as little as 60 to 90 days. The debt is gone. Now imagine how fast you can build that credit back up, because that debt is now gone. That you can now go on out and you have that fresh start. You're still going to get people think, oh, I'm never going to get credit again. Trust me, the credit card companies are going to send you credit cards very quickly thereafter. You've gotten rid of the debt, but here's the beauty of going through bankruptcy. Now what the government tries to do is they try and educate you so you don't fall back into the same mistakes you do. So what they do is when you go through bankruptcy, you're going to have 2 sessions at the beginning and at the end that you have to go through credit counseling. So they're going to help teach you the error of your past ways so that you don't fall into those traps again.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, that's another thing that I would never have known about bankruptcy. So what types of, I know that there's more than one type of bankruptcy. I think most people are familiar with the business one, which is Chapter 11. But I know that there are others. So can you sort of walk us through the business one and what that's
Sure.
about, and then walk us through maybe some of the personal? Because you're talking about personal here too, with everything going on.
The steps are basically the same. Chapter 11 deals with a business. And maybe you have a great business, and you have a great business idea and a great business model. But again, things have gone wrong. You haven't been able to sell. You don't have buyers. You ran out of product that you couldn't get out there. You got too much credit, and you just didn't do it responsibly. And so businesses fall on hard times. Going through Chapter 11 allows you to restructure that debt, deal with that debt, and allows the business to continue. You will often see stories about how businesses emerge from Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they continue on. You don't have to shutter the doors. Sometimes you just need a fresh start, and once you've dealt with the debt, you're free to go about your business and run your business and follow that dream. So Chapter 11 is one way. Now, if you have a personal problem, you're personally in financial straits, then there are 2 options to go with. And this is really critical to married couples, because so many people are probably finding themselves lying awake at night because they know they have terrible debt and they don't know how to deal with it. Statistics tell us that financial problems are probably the #1 leading cause to a marriage failure. So if you can get a handle on your debt, think of that fresh start that you have. It's almost like walking out into the morning after a bad storm. You can breathe easier. Things are better. Now you have a plan. Now you don't have to worry about, do I have to tell my kids, we have to move because we can't live here anymore, and taking them out of that school. You don't have to live with that fear, do I have to tell my spouse how bad things are? You don't have to be sitting there going, I don't want to pick up the mail. I don't want to answer the phone because it's going to be a creditor. And bankruptcy can give these people a fresh start in as little as 90 days. That fast you can get your life back.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's huge.
I honestly, again, we're learning so much. I didn't know that. And I think, I love what you're bringing to the audience here today. You're bringing hope around a word that I think most people have been terrified about. So when you're talking about and this is something I didn't know before, but there are two different types of personal bankruptcy.
Yes.
I think most people don't know that. Can you tell us a little bit about what each of those are?
Sure. There's either Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. So the question is, what's the difference? When you would come on in and meet with an attorney, what they're going to do is they're going to put you through what we call a stress test. You're very familiar with a stress test to see how the heart and the lungs are operating. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to look at your finances. If you fall below the state's median income, then you can apply for Chapter 7. If your income is higher than the state's median income, it doesn't mean you don't have debt and you can't deal with it. It just means that you have to go in a different direction, and that's Chapter 13.
Okay.
So what the differences are with Chapter 7, what we're going to be doing is discharging a lot of your debt. Now, again, here's a big myth. People think, oh, I'm going to lose all of my property. Actually, you're not. Most people will keep most of their property in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. There are a lot of exceptions to the various rules that say that you have to liquidate your assets in a Chapter 7. So most of your household goods, most all your property, you're going to get to keep because there's very exceptions to them. If you have too much stuff, you might have to lose one or two things. But what's going to happen is you go through the stress test. We see that you're below the state median. We're then going to file for bankruptcy for you. When you file, there is an automatic stay. Creditors have to, by law, stop dead in their tracks. And if you can get a filed bankruptcy in before your landlord or your mortgage company gets a judgment on you, it can help stay foreclosure as well. So it buys you a little extra time there. Now, once you have filed, a trustee is going to be appointed to your matter. That's going to be the person who basically looks at everything from the government standpoint. You're going to have, within about 30 days or so, you're going to have a meeting of the creditors. You're going to have a plan put together, and around the 60-day mark, most of that debt is going to get discharged. And you emerge from bankruptcy, and the debt is now gone. You have a fresh spot at life. Now, if you want to go Chapter 13, now you're falling above the state median income. That's going to be a little bit different. Here we're going to restructure your debt.
Before you go on, we're going to stop for a quick commercial break, but we'll pick up right where you left off.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, cliffhanger.
Exactly.
We'll see you back after a commercial break.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Welcome back. Today we're here and we're learning so much from an incredible attorney, John Benson. He's educating us about not only the timely aspect, but in a sense the long-standing mistakes or misinterpretations that surround bankruptcy. John, thank you for educating us. Right before we left, we were talking a little bit about chapter, 13, was that right?
Yes.
So,
with Chapter 13, you are falling above the state median income level. So with that, the process is going to be similar yet different. You're going to file for bankruptcy after you've passed your stress test. Now we know which place to put you in, Chapter 13. Once you file, there's going to be that automatic stay. Again, all creditors have to come to a stop right then and there. They could even be eviction proceedings, like the sheriffs could be coming over to the house. Everything has to stop until the court has had a chance to address everything. Now with the Chapter 13, it's a little different after this point than the Chapter 7. With the Chapter 7, you're going to have a trustee appointed, we're going to take a look at your debt, and a little over 60 days or so, most of that debt's going to get discharged and you're on your way. With Chapter 13, we're going to have a trustee appointed. We're still going to have a meeting of the creditors, but in this case, we're going to restructure your debt. We're going to break it down in a way that you can actually handle it and get it into payments that you can actually handle. And with that, probably over the next 36 to 60 months, you're going to be paying back that debt in a form that you can actually handle. So it's just the government looking at everything and rewrapping everything in a way that you can deal with it and giving you the time to deal with it. At the end of that 36 or 60 months, whatever applies to you, then again, you're going to be discharged from bankruptcy and you have that fresh start. It's important to note with both types, as soon as you file, one of the first things you're going to have to do is credit counseling. So you'll have your first round of credit counseling at that point, and this will be a good chance to learn the error of your ways, learn ways that you can now cope with things going forward so you don't have to ever file again. And then when you get done the bankruptcy, before your discharge, again, you're going to go through that second round of credit counseling, which will cover more stuff and again, give you tips and try and reinforce what you've already learned in the first session. So again, you don't have the problems going forward.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is credit counseling just individual for the person, or is it actually like a seminar that you are with other people?
Well, it's going to be structured for what you need. Sometimes you're going to be with other people because there's just general concepts that everyone needs to know, and other times you may find that it's a little more individualistic. Either way, you're going to have to go through it, and that's the beauty of it. If you go to look for credit counseling online, or you look for debt reduction companies, you're basically on your own. You're paying a fee and you're hoping. And hope, as we've talked before, is not a plan. If you file for the bankruptcy, here you're going through a process that is recognized by the federal government. It is cloaked in the protections of the federal government, and it is a responsible way to deal with your debt. So now you're not sticking your head in the sand and pretending that it'll go away. You're not hiding from it. You're dealing with it right on, and then you're getting it discharged. And imagine what your life is going to be like when those worries are taken away. Imagine what you could do once you move forward responsibly, now that that debt is set aside.
I guess one question is, a lot of people wind up getting into this position with credit cards, and particularly those who have some modest credit rating, so their interest rates, the bank takes on, retains risk, and they pass that risk on in higher credit card rates. Now you then go through and you're restructuring your debt in Chapter 13. You have 3, 4, 5 years to pay. Are you getting charged that 24, 28% interest over that time? Or is the interest held, or is it moderated in some way? Or how does that interest work? Because that's really what hurts a lot of people.
That's a great question. When you go through debt reduction or credit counseling, again, these creditors, they don't have to negotiate with you. They really hold the cards at that point. When you're going through the bankruptcy, and if you're going, say, through a Chapter 13, the government is restructuring your debt. They're going to tell the creditors what they're going to receive. They don't really have a whole lot of say in it. And so they can help shape what that interest is going to look like and how those payments coming back to the credit cards are going to look like. Now you have the power. Before, you're just kind of hoping that someone's going to give you a deal. And yeah, in some cases they will, but they don't have to. And right now, what a lot of companies are doing is, now that the moratoriums are over, now that they know that the monies are running on out, creditors are starting to panic a little bit, and they're racing to court as fast as they can. And when they're racing to court, now you're really panicking. If you weren't worried before, you're going to be worried once you're served with a complaint by a sheriff. So this is a responsible way to take that stuff on and give you the control now.
So I guess one other question, maybe this is more relevant to Chapter 7, where they're going to be discharging. And again, you can imagine someone has a lot of credit card debt. Maybe somebody has a vehicle or two that they're outside of where they should have normally gone, or they have a lease that now they can't get something new because there's such a shortage, and they're paying exorbitant mileage rates or whatever, they've extended it. Can you sort of, in a sense, pick and choose there and say, look, I continue to pay my mortgage. I want to protect my mortgage, but I want to have the bankruptcy look at these other things that are really hurting me, so that, in a sense, you can protect your home or your homestead, or is it just, it all goes into the pot and someone looks at it?
It's going to go into the pot and someone's going to look at it, but again, in most cases, there are usually exceptions that are going to protect that personal property. There's going to be exceptions to make sure that you do have a car, that you do have a house, that you do have the furnishings in the house that you're comfortable with. Now if you have 3 or 4 homes,
yeah,
maybe that might be a little bit much. Maybe you really went overboard, and we needed to pare you down, but in such a way that allows you to survive and move forward. But for the most part, in Chapter 7, that's one of the big surprises people have, is that they're not going to have to get rid of their things, that they are going to be protected. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand, bankruptcy is an individual thing. A lot of people will think that, okay, if one spouse has to file for bankruptcy, they both have to file for bankruptcy. They do not. The spouse that has the larger amount of debt in their name, they can file for bankruptcy, and the other spouse doesn't have to enter into bankruptcy. So nothing happens with them. So just because one goes in doesn't mean they both have to go in. Now, if both spouses have the majority of the debt together in their name, sure, they might both have to file. But in most instances, only one individual would usually have to file.
That's huge.
That's
I think that leads us into the next question that I was going to ask. I think you've debunked a lot of things here, but what are some of the myths out there around bankruptcy that scares people into wanting to do it? Because everything that you're saying here, to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, there shouldn't be all this fear and anxiety around it. It's actually a way to protect people and help people.
Sure. We've already talked about a couple of the myths. It's, while your credit rating is going to take a little bit of hit, let's be realistic, it probably wasn't that great to begin with. And now that you've gotten that debt off of your shoulder, and you don't have that debt weighing down on that credit, your credit is free to rebuild. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, it can do so very quickly. You will get those credit card offers again very, very soon. Hopefully you'll learn how to deal with it this time instead of the problems you've had in the past. We've talked about the fact that you're not going to lose all your possessions. Most of them are going to be protected. We've talked about the fact that both spouses don't have to file. Other things, taxes. In some instances, people are going to have to be dealing with taxes. They haven't paid those taxes. Mm-hmm. In some instances, taxes can be discharged. Now, there's going to be a couple caveats. You have to make sure that you have filed all of your returns. You have to be current on your returns. But if you have, in some instances, some of those taxes that have been weighing you down can be forgiven. But you want to make sure that you're current on your tax filings. If you're not current on your tax filings, the government's not really going to do a lot for you there.
Yeah, so that makes sense to me, but I think most people, you just debunked that would probably think that if you're filing your taxes, then you have to pay for them. But you're saying there are people, as long as people filed, if they can't afford to pay them, that can get lumped in.
Correct.
That's huge.
Now, another thing, some people will think, oh, I'm getting ready to file for bankruptcy, so I'm just going to go on a spending spree. I'm just going to go on out and buy all sorts of stuff because it's all going to be forgiven. No, that's called fraud. And if you do something like that when the government's taking a look at everything, they're going to see in the days leading up to bankruptcy, you went on this giant spending spree. That's not going to be looking at favorably. So what you want to make sure is that, again, you are being a responsible individual, and we're going to deal with your past problems. Don't run on out and create new ones just because you think that things are going to be better. It's kind of like the person who, goes and does some bad things right before they're going to have heart surgery because, it's the last big fling. No, that's just compounding the problem.
Right.
So that is one thing that you don't want to do, is go on a big spending spree right before you file. Please be responsible.
So what is the first step, I guess, a person should take if they're watching and they're getting all this knowledge from you? What's the first step towards bankruptcy that they need to do? What would they do?
The very first step is go find an attorney who is experienced in these types of matters. Do you need an attorney? No, you don't have to. But think about it. The one thing that's going to protect most of your possessions are the exceptions. If you don't know what those exceptions are and you don't know where to look for them, you're not going to do as well. So go find an experienced attorney who knows about this stuff. They will put you through that stress test, and now they can start shaping the conversation as to which way you should go, when you should go, let's file. Make sure that they're aware of everything. If you're being sued, make sure that they're aware. Bring copies of that paperwork in, because sometimes we have to go a lot faster. Can we? Sure. If you come running on in and eviction is imminent or something, yes, there are things that can be done right away, but you have to take the first step. That's the biggest thing. You have to act.
John, very briefly, that there's a real important story that you bring to mind of a fellow by the name of Darby who was a miner and found some gold, thought he had struck gold, couldn't find any more, and sold everything for $100 to this junk man who also bought the rights to the mine. This junk man went and got an expert, and he says, well, wait a minute, this is a fault line. That means the gold has got to be 3 feet off of where he was. And that junk man wound up taking millions upon millions of dollars in the 1800s out of the mine. Why? Because he knew to get an expert. You need an expert when you're looking at putting your wills together, when you have a personal injury, when you're looking to file for bankruptcy. John is one of the top experts, there's no question, and he's just a great man who's driven with the right purpose. But that's exactly what you're saying, is you need that expert, and you're it. And yes, there are others. Find the expert that you want to work with. And John, as an expert, how do people find you if they want to talk to you about this?
They can find us online at PenglaseandBenson.com. They can find us on social media, and they can give us a call at 215-348-4416.
John, thank you so much for your time today, for your education for us, for our viewers. Our viewers, we love you, and we appreciate all the emails we get. Keep them coming. Let us know your thoughts on the show. Please reach out to us at marriagemattershosts@gmail.com. That's marriagemattershosts@gmail.com, or visit us on our website at twinlightscoaching.com. Until next week, we wish you an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, and safe time.
Thanks for watching.